While growing up, what bizarre things did your family do that you thought was normal at the time? My dad tried to kill the Easter bunny every year. He would literally run out into the yard with his gun and take a few shots. Then he would come back inside grumbling about how he would get him next year. We thought it was both terrifying and hilarious. I didn't realize how weird it was until I told people about that tradition later in life. Growing up in a home for suicidal girls, me and my C's lived like siblings to these teenagers. Having my father so wounds shut by the dinner table was not a dramatic event. Blood trails in the hallways was nothing to cause any major alarms. Getting food thrown at me from those who suffered from eating disorders when they got aggravated from having to eat was not common, but still hardly a memorable event. The thing is that there are probably so many things others would consider strange that I never thought about. Come to think about it, having 7 extra siblings living with us for 2 to 3 years at a time would be one of those feelings. I was like a skinny calm center in the middle of the angst and blood-filled universe that was our home. And I turned out fine. We got certain foods on a very regular basis that were wrapped in white labels with basic black text labeling what they were. Rice, processed cheese product, tomato sauce. My mom always had a really tired, sad look on her eyes when she brought them home. I thought lunch meat came in one type, bologna. Every few months, we'd have camping out in the house. I used to get excited for it. All the power would go out, and we'd use candles and eat stuff out of the fridge all at once. I remember when it was winter, I'd have about 10 blankets on me on those nights. I was also not allowed to talk about this stuff to any of the other kids. Yeah. Growing up poor didn't suck until you realized you were poor. Living poor and raising a child in that had to be a nightmare. For a while, ages 4 to 8, my mom would make us our favorite foods for Thanksgiving. Rather than the normal meal, my sister and I would choose 2 things we wanted. I always chose chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese. My sister would usually choose Salisbury steak and something like scrambled eggs. Then we would have some veggies also. I always thought it was super awesome, because usually we would only eat food I thought was gross like shepherd's pie or buttered noodles. Turns out right after my dad left we were shit poor and my mom could not afford traditional holiday meals. I was lucky enough to be born to an amazing mother who has since done very well for her and her children. Even when we were poor I never knew it, we still did cool shit, I thought, like backyard camping trips, hunting for dinosaur eggs on the weekends at the quarry. It was all fun, just had to be free was all. My siblings and I all beat the shit out of each other. Bloody whatevers, broken bones, loss of teeth, you name it. Usually it was my brothers who went after my sister and I, and we'd fight back. My dad would cheer us on, like give him a right hook a like a lizard kisses. Solid takedown alks bro. I thought it was perfectly normal until one day my school counselor asked me why I had 5 little bruises perfectly formed into fingers on my arm. My brother had grabbed me as I was trying to run away. CPS was called, social workers visited, and we were told by our parents to lie if we wanted to continue living with them. Nothing ever came of it. My friend's family had strange holiday traditions. One example is that they always ordered pizza for Thanksgiving. Not too weird. Christmas though. Christmas was kinda weird. They didn't believe in Santa and instead had the Christmas bunny. Now the Christmas bunny was tricky. He wouldn't just leave your presents under the tree. He would leave a note. The note was a clue that began your hunt for presents. Clues led to clues that led to more clues that led to gifts. The clues would bring you everywhere. Back of the toilet bowl. Mom's intimate drawer. Buried in the cat litter box. Outside in the freezing Minnesota winter. Theses were difficult clues as well. I remember once my friend didn't find his gifts until after New Year's. They still do this, even though they are all 20 plus, but now the clues lead them around town. It's pretty intense I guess. My fiance's family took baths together. Still do apparently. Let's see. A 17-year-old, a 8-year-old, and 2 parents in a tiny ass tub. My fiance does not participate. That's just the tip of the weird as fuck iceberg. They also up until a year ago kept asking my fiance to sleep in their bed with them. I hate my in-laws. Fiance thought this was all normal until I had to break it to her. Every year for Easter my parents would set up a video camera in the living room overnight so that we can catch the Easter bunny in the act while he hid our baskets and colored eggs around the house. We would go to bed right after we set it up and started recording. After about 20 minutes of recording, a stuffed animal bunny would be hopping around the living room using a stop motion technique that my parents used, hopping around hiding our eggs and baskets. As kids we thought it was absolutely amazing that we caught the real Easter bunny in the act. When we would have family over for Easter dinner we would show everyone how sneaky and clever we were that we got it on camera. Kinda weird, but I cannot wait to do this to my kids one day. My father was paranoid that if someone broke in, they would steal his video games. This was in the 90s, and we had a PC, so the video games came on about 7 or 8 floppy disks. Remember those, kids? Anyway, we had about 7 crates of floppy disks for his video game library, and they had to be hidden under the bed. Every time we went away, the computer room was stripped, and the floppy disks were stowed under the bed. Because, now, burglars would never look there. The PC stayed in place. The TV stayed in place. The jewelry and everything else stayed in place. His floppy disks had to be protected at all costs. We were never broken into. We lived in a small village England with a crime rate of precisely 0. He just had a thing about his floppy disks. Eventually we found his adult games collection, so maybe that's what it was about. Growing up, my family had a unique whistle of a few short notes. This was because, especially in the pre-cell phone era, when you're in public and it's time to go, or you're looking for someone in a crowd, if you heard the whistle it meant someone in the family was looking for you and you should go see what was up. Having a system like that is really useful, but the first time others heard about it, they were shocked I'd respond to my mom's whistling like a dog. Apparently every morning in my so's house her dad would get fully dressed for his office job, but forgetting trousers as a joke. He would open the front door and announce his departure and his kids would yell "You forgot your trousers," only for him to look down and go "Oh no," and dash back upstairs to put them on. Every morning. It's a cute thing to do for your kids and commit to it for years. It was a fond memory for her until I reminded her that as her dad gets older it's only a matter of time before her dad goes to work without trousers on, and it's not a joke. My sister and I invented a game specifically designed to drive our puritanical mom insane. If it was a boring weekend or hot summer day and the three of us were laying around bored and vegging out, I'd look over at her and say with a bored expression, "Bitch." My mom would snap at me and say "John Walker Spud." My sister would look back with a bored expression. "Asshole." My mom would snap at her. "Tramp virgin now at all more," and that's tough talk for someone who can't remember the speed limit. Those are bold words for someone who forgets to wear clean underwear. We'd go on and on like this, just cutting the fuck out of each other and laughing our asses off, while our mom would angrily shout that siblings aren't supposed to talk to each other like that. A wonderful game. I love the fuck out of my sister, and we are still the best of friends. We don't play the game anymore though, now that we have kids. We also used to say "I'm the good one." My mom would try to be passive aggressive and challenge us to do better by saying things like, "Daughter, why is your plate still on the table instead of in the sink, where it belongs?" So I'd pipe up and say, "Oh, that's because I put mine in the sink and rinsed it, because I'm the good one." We still use "I'm the good one." Our kids all think it's hilarious, and they use it too. We would go without food or medicine. Not because we were poor, we had money, but my mother wanted to tell people we were poor, because my father wasn't paying child support. Also a lie. We were never allowed to go to anyone else's house, because then we'd find out being beaten wasn't normal. We weren't allowed to be sick. If we coughed, or had a snuffy nose we would be beaten, and have our toys taken away. Grew up in a neighborhood where all the kids would just crash at anyone's house. Like my parents wouldn't freak out if I didn't show up at night, they just made a call to figure out where all the kids had ended up. We'd just occupy a room in anyone's house and sleep all jumbled up. So I guess this isn't just a family thing, but still, my friends all think we were nuts. I had an awesome time though. When it was getting close to bedtime my parents would call it pumpkin time, like Cinderella. I did this once a few years ago with friends who were over for board games, and when everyone started yawning I said it must be getting close to pumpkin time. There was an awkward silence and confused looks before I offered the explanation. I grew up thinking it was normal. We also called broccoli and cauliflower clouds and trees. My brother refused to eat broccoli and cauliflower, but loved clouds and trees. He also hated ham, but loved elephant trunk, the small round ham that totally had no resemblance other than being roughly round when cut in slices. I have no idea why ham was offensive but elephant trunk was okay. Probably just hysterical crying. My family, especially my dad's family, just cry about everything. Happy, sad, angry, grieving. Didn't really matter. They just seemed to always be crying, and once one of them started everyone else would join in. It really wasn't until after I had years of therapy that I realized that it really isn't normal to just be crying all the time. I still get teary sometimes, and it's not that I never cry, because frankly no amount of therapy can undo a lifetime of conditioning. But at least now I recognize that if I can't stop crying there is something really wrong with me, and it needs to be worked on. This really sunk in after moving to the UK and meeting my husband's family, who are just so damned English and stoic. It makes visiting my family seem like a trip to the loony bin. My dad and I like rolling rice into little balls during meals. Sometimes we'll order rice just so we can do it. If rice isn't available, noodles and bread can work too. My mom tried putting a stop to it a long time ago, but she gave up and joined in. My boyfriend told me he reserves the right to publicly shame me for that habit in front of our future kids, just so they don't start doing it too. Every Friday night, my mom would set up blankets and pillows in the living room and we'd have a sleepover, just her and me. We made popcorn on the stove and watched the Giflin Loop. I have such fond memories of us watching Sabrina and pretending we were witches. Once we snuck into my parents' bedroom and tried to make my sleeping dad levitate. In the morning my dad would make a big show of waking us up and bringing us breakfast to eat in our makeshift bed. He'd pretend to be a butler and like we were queens. He'd talk in a very posh English accent and do very exaggerated bows. I loved those times. Come to find out, most families don't do shit like that. I definitely want to do the same thing when I have a kid, though. Those are some of my favorite memories. I'm not sure if this qualifies as weird given the context here, but I grew up on a dairy farm and pretty much had a part-time job since I was tall enough to clean a teat. I was probably 8 or 9 when I started working at least a full day every other Saturday or Sunday. I'd work one day every weekend. It just alternated between Saturday or Sunday. Starting when I was 12 or 13, I'd work 6 days/week during the summer. If I was going to a friend's house or something like that, there would be exceptions, but otherwise, I was working. When I'd have friends over, they'd have to work too. I finally put a stop to it when my first high school girlfriend came over, and my dad tried to get us to go out and pick rocks in a field before we went to the movies. I think I was 16 or 17 at the time. After that, it was always a joke that anyone coming over to my house had to pick rocks. The other part of growing up on a farm is that you're generally given a lot of responsibility at an early age. When I was 12, I was driving around $200,000 worth of equipment on the roads, and I'd drive a tractor all day long. Then I'd go to school on Monday, and I'd have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. That was an odd one to reconcile. On Sunday I can operate a machine worth more than 5 years of the teacher's salary, but on Monday, she can tell me if it's okay for me to pee or not. I absolutely could not wait to get out of school, and I realized this when I was a lot younger than most of my peers. I had a lot more freedom than most of my friends. For me, since I was 6 or 7, it was nothing for me to hop on my bike and ride to my grandmother's house, a mile away by roads, to swim in the pool, unsupervised. My brother and I had tree forts all over the farm. When I was a bit older, like 8 or 10, it was a huge deal at a good friend's house for us to cross the street to go to another friend's house. There was a family meeting and a map drawn for us. It was so weird playing along with things like that. When I was growing up from very early on, my family went to the grocery store every Sunday and we each had a budget for food for the week. Part of it was poverty, but it was mostly because my parents were never there to cook dinner, so rather than there being family meals, most nights I had a can of microwave ravioli. Having to plan meals for myself at such a young age made me be independent, but I think the lack of familial interaction has also made me more distant from my parents. My brother and I were very close growing up, and still are. We made up games that were pretty dangerous. We'd swing like Tarzan on a jump rope tied to the second floor banister, and fly down staircases. We'd get in fights, obviously, but we forgave easily. As I got older I realized that not everyone was close to their siblings. I also realized not everyone dreamed of jumping from a second-story window into a 6 feet deep pool. It's amazing we are both still alive and well. Thanks, Mom.